If you look at Mary Poppins, for instance, what you'll see there is actually a lot of gestural technology, or rather gestural interactions.
I'm here right now with James Haliburton, the CEO of Swedish design company TOPP. How are you, James?
Doing great, thanks.
This is awesome. Just being up here and seeing all the action down there,
It's really nice to see this overview.
It really is. So, with TOPP, I feel like you guys really have your hands in a diverse range of technology and products, including smartwatches, electric cars, fitness trackers. What is that common design philosophy that you infuse into every project that you do?
So the motto of TOPP is actually shaping the new. So we work with organizations who have either new technologies emerging or addressing emerging behaviors of their different users or consumer groups. And essentially we're trying to find value where there aren't actually existing design patterns or there's no best practice. And so for us, it's really exciting to work across industry because we get to bring a really good design methodology, but to new spaces to help find something truly new and valuable for people.
So you're talking about automation. Let's talk about wearables. I mean, wearables have been huge for years now, but the design has changed drastically. So for this year, what are some of the trends we can see with wearables and design?
So I think it's really important to start looking not only at the large consumer electronic giants, where you've seen smartwatches emerge over the last few years and fitness trackers. Those, a lot of the time, the real differentiation in that is not so much the interaction models on the screens themselves or the form factors, but actually what you can do with the data behind it. And then if you really start saying, well, that's great for the consumer space, I think what's really interesting is what's going on in more the industrial and commercial spaces, because in those enterprise spaces or commercial spaces, those large-scale organizations can create customized hardware, customized wearables for huge workforces. And at that point, you get to create these tailored experiences. And so think of field workers for a large energy company. Those guys will have heads-up displays and wearables. They'll have watches to communicate information. And this really makes them more efficient, more effective, and for them, it makes their day-to-day life much easier and productive as well.
So seeing the big picture of how each device or each technology plays into the big picture, right?
That's right.
But it's interesting you say this, because if you look at the evolution of technology, even at Mobile World Congress, we're almost getting away from actual hardware and devices. We're getting to data intelligence.
That's right.
That's what you're talking about. How does that dictate where design is headed?
Well, I'm not sure it dictates exactly where it's headed. It's an interplay between the two of them. I think design has a vision for where a lot of these things can come from. I think if you look backwards in order to look forwards on a lot of these technologies, you will have seen them, of course, in sci-fi movies like Minority Report and things like that. But what's interesting is actually if you look even further back to Disney movies from the 50s, if you look at Mary Poppins, for instance, what you'll see there is actually a lot of gestural technology, or rather gestural interactions from Mary snapping her fingers and things being cleaned up. At one scene, she speaks to a mirror and she's got an avatar that replies back. The kids also do other types of interactions with their home. And those more magical scenes are what we're starting to see today, because we're able to use things like AI and voice assistants and really a distributed experience through IoT. That future looks a lot more like this magical realism that we used to experience than it does any of the sci-fi movies over the last 20 years. And I think that's a really great place to take inspiration to look forward to.
And speaking of that inspiration, I'm always curious about this with design. Chicken or the egg, right? Is it the user experience and user demands that result in the actual design, or is it design that dictates what users want? Because I think about, if I can snap my fingers and my cheeseburger would appear, yes, that would be great, but that was never part of my vocabulary back then, because it wasn't even part of my imagination.
Right.
So which is it?
Yeah, it's both, and that's kind of the hard answer, or the sit on the fence answer. Design plays multiple roles within defining new experiences, and Sometimes it's incremental, and when it's incremental and you want to improve a product, you want to make it, for instance, more seamless or more effective, particularly when you have an existing demand, then it's about really listening to those users and taking that feedback pretty directly from them, or doing some sort of analysis to understand why something isn't working, and you're fixing problems a lot of the time at that point, or fixing their existing problems. But then there's something like design innovation, and design innovation is incorporating design thinking into early methodologies to define strategy and to define new product categories and new experiences as a whole. In that case, as you're saying, you might not know what you want. People actually have a difficult time articulating the unknown.
Exactly.
And in that case, that's where those methodologies of experimentation and prototyping really come in handy, because then you get to put something out into the wild, get feedback to it, and start building real products around that. What we see right now, which is great for design teams, but really troubling for some technology companies, is that as we are moving into a new generation of technologies around IoT, data intelligence, is they're going back to old engineering methodologies. They think, oh, just because we can, we're going to put it out in the wild and we're going to wrap some marketing around it. And what they're finding is that over the last couple of years, they're shipping very large-scale, expensive products and services, and they're not getting good results. And so what we're expecting to see, and what we are seeing, is essentially what we saw about 10 years ago, once the iPhone and Android was released, where UX became a common vernacular, or part of the vernacular for the mobile industry. If you remember before that, could often be an afterthought, or it was just kind of, it prettied up the UI, but wasn't taken in this holistic sense of defining your product value. And so as we get into these larger scale systems, as you're saying, emerging into the real world around us, the need is again present for designers to be able to work in that new space. And that's both the challenge for designers, but also the challenge for organizations to adopt new design methodologies into that space, to help get in front, to help define the value before they decide to spend $500 million developing something.
Right, almost like seeing into the future in a way, in terms of holistic design. And when you talk about that, can you think of a tech company that is just really knocking it out of the park when it comes to design?
So I think the experiences that Amazon are enabling, I love platform companies. I love companies that enable developers and designers to build something new, and really Amazon is running out ahead.
I have a lot of designer friends, and I refer them to your Medium article where you talk about how to stay relevant in this changing world of technology. What are some of the tips that you gave in that article?
So one of the core elements of being a designer is the aspect of sketching. And sketching is a process of trying things out quickly, cheaply. And when we used to work with mediums like user interfaces, it's really easy to sketch out. You can put that on the whiteboard and you can see what it's going to look like.
Wireframe.
Yeah, exactly. And everybody can kind of circle around this and have a good enough idea of what you mean. And there are good patterns for drawing, this arrow moves over to this state, and here's the button press, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
All great for doing screen-based experiences. When you move into even just working with voice assistants, whether it's Alexa or something from Google or something else entirely, that repertoire, that idea of having a collection of patterns that you can sketch has gone out the window.
Yeah.
Now the design students we work with, they want to be working with this, but there's simply no best practice for them to learn from. And so you have to learn as a designer to continually reinvent yourself and reinvent essentially your palette.
What do you think is the most challenging project that you've worked on in recent years?
Oh, in recent years. So we have a lot of challenging projects. And I think actually one of the most interesting is something that very few people would ever see. And it's with a company called Schneider Electric. Schneider Electric, one of the things they do is facility management. They essentially will do all of the electric components in buildings and facilities, like this, for instance, and everything from light switches to behind the scenes. And so, you're working with really established old industries, but you're bringing in the potential of things like building automation and tracking and workflow and things like that. But really, at the core of it is that idea of workflow. And how do people manage buildings? How do they work with these really complex systems? And at the heart of it, what you discover is that it's about the people and their daily lives. And again, I think it reiterates, or rather, it reinforces this idea that in any complex system, and no matter how no matter how technically challenging or complex something might be, the most complex part is solving the human element, because people are, in the end, working with those systems themselves, and they respond to something that is designed well. And that's what we're looking for, to see where design can bring value to those complex systems.
And you know that saying, secrets don't make friends, but I do think secrets do make friends. What are some future projects that you can talk about with us right now that you're really excited about?
So I can talk generally about some of the different ways of working that we've got going on at the studios right now, and so we're addressing things like, for instance, the aviation industry. And if you think about the aviation industry, they've got a lot of different components to what actually makes a plane, and everything from the assembly line to logistics to the maintenance to the actual in-cabin experience themselves. And so you're looking at these massively distributed systems, and so we're building out prototypes across these entire systems at once. We're also getting into more physical spaces where we're using things like virtual reality to simulate spaces. So you can imagine if you wanted to design the future of a grocery store. So what we're doing is building up models in virtual space where we can then control all of the interactive experiences and really walk around and generate real data and start doing intelligent experiences and walkthroughs of those journeys that people are taking through the shop, and those are really exciting.
Immersive design.
That's right, and so you can actually then design within the virtual space itself, and of course, for our clients, something like that really de-risks their investments, but at the same time, for us, it's a very generative experience. It allows us to explore things we couldn't otherwise have access to.
That's super exciting. Here at Tech the Lead is a play on word for take the lead. Mm-hmm. So what would take the lead for TOPP mean to you?
Oh, well, I think we're a different kind of company. Take the lead within design. I think that's kind of an oxymoron. Design is a collaborative initiative, and what we're interested in seeing is the evolution of practice and the evolution of design practice. And how it can influence different organizations. So for us to take the lead or design the lead, as it might be, is for us to bring a lot of other people along in that journey with us. Because design alone actually doesn't mean a heck of a lot. It's just about identifying and defining problems and potentially solutions, but it really takes a full community of engineers and marketers and business developers to bring those solutions out to real people.
That's a very modest and humble answer. It's a collaborative effort, but come on, design is pretty darn cool, and it definitely leads the way for a lot of technology. Well, thank you so much, James, for doing this interview.
Thank you.
I love learning more about design because it's that aspect that people don't really talk about in, this thoroughly. So thank you for giving us an insider look into what TOPP is all about.